What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Sunday Slaughter podcast. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Charles.
What up, everybody?
And we have a special guest. It's I was going to say late, but it's in fact very early for him. And he actually woke up to do this podcast. And I'm very grateful. We have Rossi. So very excited because the last Visions was all about Starks. And I'm going to admit that I was quite worried because there were a lot of people that were just waiting to see what the designers had in store or what is, in my opinion, the strongest faction in 1.6. So let's just continue the trend of talking about a faction and what their identity was in 1.6. Rossi, I understand you played quite a bit of Starks competitively. We'll start with you. What did you think about Starks in 1.6?
Starks in 1.6 had the answer of everything. So you could charge, you could play defensive if you want. Not that great, but you could. You can the late game. You could out activate everyone, and as you said, in my personal opinion as well, Starks were the best factions.
Yeah, I think it was a lot of things when you combined their powerful deck. I feel like there were times when you drew your opening hand and you were like, okay, I'm not worried about anything. They had the advantage of activations, as you said. Being able to field wolves was very powerful. You also had just efficient units and attachments. I think all those combined really made for a hard time if your opponent was playing any other faction, barring probably Free Folk. Charles, when you started the game, did you automatically see the strength of Starks? I know that you're a Free Folk player, of course, but did you struggle playing against them at all?
I actually got kind of lucky and was able to dodge Starks in the beginning. As I mentioned before, in my meta, a lot of people were excited about Baratheons, and they were playing a lot of neutrals, and a dedicated Lannister player. They played a ton of Starks in the beginning and realized they had a real big advantage at some point between the Kickstarter and when I got in 1.6. And the only real players who played them had kind of retired them for a while for other things to play. Because they even felt kind of soft to them on a local level, much less internet meta, So I was able to dodge them for a while until I got my feet set in the game. So by the time I really faced Targs, Starks on like TTS and stuff, I was pretty well versed in Free Folk, and therefore didn't struggle because Free Folk was one of the few factions that had answers for Starks. So I was able to dodge a lot of the like bad feel window for players. But looking at them whenever I was like trying to get into the game and considered playing them, I did consider playing them because I did like their activation and their hit and run style. And it didn't take very long of like watching some bat reps and reading a little bit before I bought my Free Folk lot off a local, which, like I said, my faction of choice kind of got decided for me because it just became available. It was pretty easy to see that there was a lot of things to exploit there that I enjoyed, right? Like, as a seasoned wargamer, their mid-rangeness and efficiency was pretty obvious. And I was like, all right, I'm not sure if they're top tier yet because I don't fully understand the meta, but like, I have a hard time believing they're not competitive because of just how much value was in their stuff. And then turns out I wasn't wrong. But no, I didn't necessarily have the struggle bus that a lot of people had because I was able to just dodge them until I played TTS. And then by then I was well into Free Folk, which actually had the tools to deal with them.
I think not only players who are dedicated to Starks are ready for a change, but people who have suffered at the hands of Starks are also ready to see, something different. So let's just jump right into what we have spoiled in the last Visions, and we'll start with the tactics deck. We have the first card here, Winter's Might, and it says when a friendly unit is performing a melee attack before rolling attack dice, this attack gains Sundering and may reroll any attack dice. After completing this attack, the attacker suffers 2 wounds, -1 wound for each of its destroyed ranks, and if you control the swords, this attack also rolls its highest attack die value. So Winter's Might, first card that we see that sort of leans into the faction identity of self-inflicting wounds. Pretty straightforward card, I think. Very aggressive and also getting the kicker from swords. What did you think about this card, Rossi, when you first saw it?
I thought it was great. I like the new idea of the Berserker style. I'm very excited about it. I thought that Thundering is the best keyword, personally, because the Vicious is not going that well anymore with the D3 runes instead of the D3 plus 1. The kicker of the sword is because they want to attack if they can. And yeah, it's not the D3 wounds for yourself anymore. It's just 2 -1 of each destroyed ranks, and you really want to use it when the enemy maybe is on the last rank or on the last beyond the first.
And it's also good if we're jumping ahead a little bit when we talk about the sworn swords. Is when you're using the sworn swords, you're going to be inflicting damage to yourself throughout the game. Just the fact that this gains sundering means that you won't have to inflict those wounds if you are attacking with the sworn swords, which is very nice. Charles, what are your thoughts?
No, it's a very good card. This is, as much as I harped on the last podcast, that synergy is the wrong term for a lot of things that are being used. This is an example of synergy. The sword kicker plays into the fact that a lot of your mechanics are wounding yourself, so the sword's kicker, the highest attack die value, makes up for the fact that you're going to go down to two ranks in a lot of cases if you're like really using a lot of the mechanics we're going to see later in the deck and later in the units. Sundering is an extremely valuable keyword, like Rossi said, because you can have Vicious all you want, but if you can't get a wound through in certain matchups, then Vicious doesn't matter. So it's a cart before the horse situation. You need to have some armor pin in a lot of lists before Vicious can really matter. So it's good. Also, re-rolling any attack dice without a lot of extra stipulations. This card doesn't have stipulations. You play it, you get a value. You did something else ahead of time, you get even more value. Reward strategy. This is a very positively designed card. You're gonna see that this play trigger is a little crowded in this deck going forward, but I don't think it's a huge deal. But it is gonna make it a little clumsy at times for new players. The biggest knock for it, and it's not about this card having a knock for it, is that the deck as a whole is gonna get a knock for repetitive triggers. But this is a great card. First couple uses, 2 wounds, 1 wound on 2 ranks. You're gonna spend a lot of time on 2 ranks in the game. A-, A card, solid card.
Personally, I also think you can combine it with the neutral units you're gonna play perfectly. It's very cool.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of the neutral units come with Vicious or other mechanics, but they lack armor pin and output, like he's pointing out. This card fixes that, right? This does a lot. This is a very flexible card. It's a great toolbox card. Hindering terrain, being no charge rerolls, re-rolling attack dice. Like, it's got everything you want. It's a fantastic toolbox card.
I feel like this is going to be a conversation that we'll have if we have time towards the end of the podcast of neutral units that would be good in this faction. When I think about this new deck and this card in particular, combining Winter's Might with Assault Orders on a unit of Flayed Men would be very nasty. All right, let's get into the next card here. As Charles mentioned, we are going to see conflicting triggers here, and this is an example of that. We have Northern Ferocity. It says when a friendly unit is performing a melee attack before rolling attack dice, this attack gains Vicious, and if the defender fails their panic test, they suffer +1 wound for each of the attacker's destroyed ranks. After completing this attack, the attacker suffers 2 wounds, -1 wound for each of its destroyed ranks. So again, we're seeing a pattern here with the self-inflicted damage. Having cards in an aggressive factions deck that is able to give these keywords, pretty powerful. Rossi, what are your initial thoughts?
Thought initially when I saw this, Darks goes on Vicious. This is a good idea. I mean, the idea was to go on the Berserker style, and okay, Vicious could create outer wounds for the moral test, but in each faction we see in moral 4, moral 5 sometimes. Vicious helps a bit, but yeah, very inefficient, in my personal thoughts. But when it works, when you could make the setup with -3 or in combination with the corpse pile, it could be very, very powerful. For example, if you're talking about the flayed man, you're going in, you're maybe stuck, and you need the wishes to pull your abilities off. And the card will help you. It's a good card, but I think personally it not fit into the usual Stark style.
Yeah, I agree. Just because we're not seeing a lot of token play from what we've seen so far in this latest Visions. This would be way more valuable if there were other ways to get out panic tokens. Of course, if you want to run neutral NCUs, maybe like Roos, that could be a thing, or Ramsey with Reek. I think this is a card that, when it works, it's going to be great. I think it could swing a game for you, but then again, without real reliable ways to force a failed panic other than just the vicious keyword, it could end up just being a dead card. What do you think, Charles?
I think it's a good. I think it's a good card. Because like we mentioned, it's a toolbox card. It doesn't necessarily fit the Stark identity, but if we're getting deep into the dojo, as I like to call it, and we're getting to a point where we can now, because we've seen tactics decks and enough things to see full lists in multiple factions, right? Vicious is actually, Gokos mentioned, neutral units. You're gonna have access to more token play. We've seen an increase in token play from control-ish commanders, so there's a decent chance we see like Howland, or we haven't seen Howland at commander attachment, but we don't know what he's got one new card, I believe. We don't know how many of his other cards have changed, or like even Roderick. But I think this card is going to be good with. We haven't seen Outriders yet, where they had their token mechanic, and things like that. So this card is going to be interesting into certain matchups. I was mentioned by dojos that because we have seen some high morale armies, you're going to be looking for your armor pin, and you're actually be trying to get your attacks and damage in kind of the old-fashioned way through attack dice. But then we still do have low morale armies in the game. You look at your free folk matchups. You look at probably your Lannister matchups. Very likely, Lannisters traditionally don't have high morale outside of faith units. And some other factions, even Baratheons, right? They have a mediocre morale, but solid armor. So there's going to be matchups where you're going to be glad this card's in your normal deck, your base deck, because you're not going to have to tech your list as hard because you have it on a stick here. So it's going to give you a better chance at having an all-comers list if you get sort of an armor skew versus a morale skew, right? So this is probably a B plus card, probably a solid B because of the conflicting trigger. But there's going to be a lot of matchups where it's not Sundering you care about because they're armor 5 or they're armor 4 or Uniflank or something. But the Vicious is going to matter because you're more guaranteed to get a point in with like a Lance charge or something, but you really want to make sure they get blowed up. So I think this is relevant in some matchups. But that's why it's going to be like a B, probably a B card.
Okay, so I totally take back what I said with the statement about token play. We're gonna talk about this next card here, and I'm totally an oversight by me because Devastating Impact is one of the cards that would be a combo for Northern Ferocity. So the new Devastating Impact says, when a friendly unit is performing a charge action before rolling charge distance dice, enemies successfully charged by this unit become panicked and vulnerable. If you control the horse, this unit may reroll any charge distance dice. So Devastating Impact, one of the top 3 cards in the original Stark deck, along with Swift Advance and Sudden Charge. We see a change here. It's no longer an auto 6 and auto hits or wounds, but still we see a charge reroll, which can be very clutch, and this isn't the first time we will talk about that type of effect with a card. Rossi, are you sad to see the original Devastating Impact changed?
I think the change of Devastating Impact was totally necessary. Personally, I love Devastating Impact to play with because it created auto threat range. If you played a dog somewhere near the middle and the other guy has attachment a solo unit. You created the era of nearly 18-inch where nobody wanted to get in. Was it 18? No, 12? 12-inch? 6 free
If you,
movement
if you
plus
had a
six
pocket swift advance, it could be 18-ish inches, no
plus
problem.
18. Okay, great. But it's totally necessary that they get rid of this plus 2 wounds. Personally, I'm thinking the loss of the 6-inch charge is a bit bad for the Stark themselves because they really love to charge. But a creation of a panic and vulnerable token is also very good. We don't know yet what the cuff brings, so maybe it's a powerful combination. We don't know yet.
We'll move on to the next card here. We have the new version of the North Remembers. We have start of any turn, target one friendly combat unit and attach this card to them until the end of the game. When a friendly infantry or cavalry unit is destroyed, place one order token on this card. While this card has a token, the attached unit always attacks using its highest attack die value, and while you control the swords, counts as rolling a 6 for all charge distance dice. So this is something we've seen before that is much like the other factions cards, but in my opinion, I think this is the most powerful one we've seen so far. We just talked about Devastating Impact always having that 6-inch auto charge distance, but now we are seeing it with the North Remembers if you have the swords. Charles, what do you think about this? Do you agree?
It's a really good card. I like this design better than the old version where all the sixes. I think it's interesting to Starks' like aggro alpha strike approach to have an auto six, but this is much more apparent to your opponent. It's got a lot more interplay now because you can block the zone, just things like that. That really matters, right? Like once it's in play, you now know there's a higher priority. Not that you need one for swords. I like the fact that this brings in a second zone to matter to Starks. So they're not bodied by somebody going first and just taking both their zones and killing half their cards. Um, so overall, real positive on this card. This is like the Baratheons one, which is you get one flat condition, which is a very powerful. Um, always attack on its highest attack die. I think that's one of the most powerful effects we've seen on these kind of cards. I agree with you there. Followed by the charge, it very much fits in the identity of Starks that they've always outlined as this alpha. Again, it makes me a little annoyed though that Targs get one token, get both effects of theirs, and neutrals need 2 tokens. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense about how this mechanic, this card type design is balanced. So I don't actually love the design space on these cards, the way they're being used 100%. But I would argue that this one is not necessarily better than the Targaryens one, though. Not just from the condition, but if we look back at it real quick, Blood of the Dragon is it's going to give them +1 attack dice, and they suffer -1 when the panic tests. So they get a damage reduction, and against and then they get an extra attack die, which could be real big. So it's probably roughly as good, except for the fact that it's got a condition, right? A zone condition, which makes it a little bit under Blood of the Dragon. So it seems a little weird, but they're breaking up how those cards are designed. But I do think this is a good card, and I do think it is a well-designed card. So I like it.
I personally think it's the best card of the deck. I don't know which commander come additionally up, but it allows you to power up your elite unit. If you play, for example, don't know, the Great Axis in combination with Vago Holt or such like this, a 9-point unit, it should better kill multiple units. And I think this card will help you for getting the charges you really, really need to get into these fights you want to fight. The condition said you must be at, I think round 4, round 5 to set to get the setup done. But I really, really love that you can pick up the North Remember quite early, put it on the unit you want, and getting the benefit out of your units you really want to sacrifice. You can play hyper aggressive with your Berserker after you have played this card because you know you're getting a value out of it.
I think this is a very good design, and this is speaking towards the other on destruction cards that we've seen in other factions, just because we're starting to see a balance of power levels within each deck. In 1.6, there did exist cards that were sort of, on destruction, but they weren't all created equal. The North Remembers was a great comeback mechanic, and it was definitely it was a thing. People would just sacrifice a wolf to reactivate Brandon Hodor berserkers and just blow up a flank. And now we see that, as Charles mentioned, it's more telegraphed now, so players or opponents have more of a chance to play around it.
Yeah, one more comment. Something worth pointing out. This does not get a token from destroying wolves. For all you people who are like, how do they address wolves? Because when we get down there, we're going to see Grey Wind is still really good, and you're probably still going to really want to take Grey Wind and have that activation and things like that. Because in Rob, it's still just 3-point activation, which is still really good above curve. This doesn't get a token from a wolf. This only gets a token if a cavalry unit or infantry unit dies. So this is really important. So they're showing you that they actually understood that it wasn't just the overall power level of Starks that were the problem. Like as a blanket, a lot of things weren't just blanketly busted in Starks. They kind of felt that way, but a lot of it was overtuned deck, and a lot of freebies were triggered. Like the old North Remembers, right? Just reactivate whenever a wolf died on stakes, right? There were a lot of gimmicks you could exploit in Starks before. They cleaned that up. So this shows that there's a fundamental understanding of what actually broke Starks was a bunch of little stuff, right? It was a bunch of little loopholes and just guaranteed off the table, like long range stuff. This is a much more polished design space right here. Okay. So just for all you people who are like, oh, well, but look at Grey Wind. Grey Wind's still super good. You're right. And they're allowed to be good, right? Starks are allowed to have good units despite being at the top for as long as they were. This is a healthy and balanced card. And I just want to give a shout out to that space there. Like people are going to argue over a lot of things when the new rules come out. These are really positive steps forward. And also, for all you big boy Grey Johns out there, fans out there who love that giant model of a man, there's a good chance he has like overrun or something, right? Because he's that kind of commander. Maybe you get lucky. Long bomb charges on 6s with we get to assault orders later, followed by an overrun, and you get to kind of live that Victorian like Tormund Pac-Man units dream in the mid to late game. Because all your stuff is half dead and really powered up, is going to be hilariously fun to play. It may also be very bad, but it doesn't mean it's not fun to play. And I'm kind of excited to see if that list pops up.
Yeah, really, really. I really would love to play 5 battle units, have a unit with overrun, just throw everything totally aggressive. Think, you want to kill me? I have my benefit.
Yeah. I think so. I think that opportunity is there now, and it won't feel bad. And I think that's cool. I think that's really cool, right? Like to celebrate Starks a little bit. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it definitely fits into what I always imagined the Stark faction and what they should be. Is just full on aggression, not care, throw all caution to the wind, and just attack. I hope we see more of that because the state of what Starks were in 1.6 was a whole lot of just oppressiveness. They not only could control the board, but they also had a plethora of other things that just were everything was just in their favor. We definitely see a different type of aggression from Starks, but we're not even halfway through some of these spoilers here. So we'll move on to the next card. We have Winners coming. When a friendly unit is performing a charge action before rolling charge distance dice, enemies successfully charged by this unit cannot be the target of friendly orders or tactics cards this turn. If you control the maneuver zone, this unit may reroll any charge distance dice. So just a reminder, the old Winners coming was sort of the Stark's control card. Very feel-bad card if you are a Baratheon player, if you are a Lannister player. But it was very utility, and I think there were times when this card was very clutch to have when you were charging in. So we're seeing the second rendition of rerolling charge distance dice here, but still the same effect. But we have different wording here. And Charles, you are a stickler for wording. So how does this How does this look to you?
This is a much more clearly written card than most cards, right? There's a lot of debate about target and other things in a more abstract term, but this one spells it out, right? Friendly unit performs the charge before rolling the charge distance. So before we learn about disorderly and anything else, it gets to happen. An enemy successfully charged by this unit cannot be the target of friendly orders or tactics cards this turn. If you control the horses, the maneuver zone, this unit may reroll any charge distance dice. So this card is very clear now on who it targets and other things, because they did clarify the targeting in the book a little bit, but it spells out the target. This enemy successfully charged by this unit might be a target of friendly orders or tactics cards this turn, so forth and so on. It can get a little messy later. Orders are the real problem with targeting, but this card is pretty clear on what it's supposed to do. I think it's a pretty potent card.
Yeah, there's a cruel difference between the old card and the new one. I talking about ready, aim, fire, for example. Before you have played this card and the other one could not resolve his order anymore. With this new trigger, I mean, the trigger is doing before the charge, of course, but the resolve is after you have charged successfully. This means then you can shift 2-inch back before the resolve had happened here. And this helps maybe Night Watcher a bit. I don't know if the things have changed. I don't know. But I think we can find it in different factions that the resolve of the trigger is very different, and it changed the gameplay with Winter is Coming a bit.
Cool. So let's move on to the next card. We have Swift Repositions. This is something we've seen before. We saw it in the Targ Tactics deck. It says, start of any turn, target one friendly combat unit. It shifts 2 inches. If you control the maneuver zone, that unit performs a 3-inch maneuver action instead. Is this the same exact wording as the Targ iteration? Yeah. Obviously, we're seeing a replacement of Swift Advance, but a more toned down design. I think I've said it before. I think it's pretty elegant, not as oppressive as Swift Advance. Big difference here, I think, is the start of any turn, because this can be used defensively. What do you think, Rossi?
If you combine it with the Order of Rob themselves, it's a very, very good combination. I think the order we will see, it's 3-inch at the start of the enemy turn, and here it's start of the turn. Is it still that you, with a new rulebook, I'm not that sure, that you can combine the order with a card?
You still get to play a card or a order on one trigger. So if your start of any
so
turn
you cannot
trigger,
combine it. I was
No.
a bit afraid that you can combine it. Okay. But personally, I'm thinking Swift Advance was very, very much too strong. I really love that they changed it. 3-inch, it's great enough. And in the most cases, it will fit to your style. You can place yourself at maybe 9-inch away from your opponent, and at the right moment, you're playing Swift Reposition, and you don't have to do it with the start of the activation of the unit anymore. So it will help you a lot, I think. It's a cool card, not that powerful like Swift Advance anymore, but a very, very good card.
Closing out the Stark Tactics deck, we have the grand finale, one of the more powerful ones. We have Assault Orders. When a friendly NCU claims a zone, replace that zone's effect with one friendly combat unit performs one melee attack action. But if an NCU claimed the swords, that combat unit may perform one charge action instead. Very straightforward, very in line with being aggressive with their play style. I think this is definitely a target for Sansa towards the mid to late game if you're trying to finish off units. Rossi, what do you think about this card?
It's very, very powerful. You can combine it with the North Remember. We should not forget this. Personally, I think if I'm the first player, I would not use it in my first turn, usually, because free attack of is good at all time. I would use the sword and then use a sword order for the second NCU maybe, because the replacement of the effect, it's personally I think a bit better than the last one, but it's so situational. Yeah, I would love to have this card all the time. As you said, I think Sansa, that's a good target.
Yeah, I mean, there's no bones about it. Free attacks and our free charges are real legit. We now see a pretty even split of horses and swords. So NCU plays could be very important to Stark. So sorry for people who were really excited for 2 NCU meta. I have a hard time seeing it when there's this much value in 2 zones for Starks. Right? Like, this is a lot of value, right? Every one of these secondary triggers is very, very worthwhile to the Stark player, right? Whether they're going first or second, they're going to get at least one of them. But they're going to want them. They're going to want options. So it's really interesting here. I see them being really aggressive on the tactics board still. But also, it's a core deck, free attack, free charge. We have a core deck, shift/maneuver. We have a core deck control card. We've got all the things we really want in a nice, well-rounded toolbox, which still makes this probably one of the best, probably second best overall, straight up core tactics deck at this point in time, which should make Stark players feel real good about their choices. But also, that's still 4 free actions in the deck as far as tactics cards go. So again, for all you people who are like, yeah, they're getting rid of all the free activations, they're not really. They're just kind of in the same places they were before, and then not in others. So it's actually a little more skewed in some cases. So that's a little frustrating as a guy who lost his. But that's a little bias coming out. Overall, though, this is actually a very healthy tactics deck, and that card's great.
One more thing, Charles. Because you mentioned the split of the horse and the swords, I personally would think that the swords are much, much better than the horse this time.
Yes.
Before, you could create a vulnerable token with a horse, or having a 6-inch charge range. Now you can just reroll or moving 1 inch more. I'm not sure that I would go for the horse anymore.
Yeah, I just wouldn't be surprised if some of the commanders have some horse inflections, considering it seems to be such a core part of the main deck.
Is this the first faction that we see with 2 different zone kickers within the basic deck?
No,
Or did Baratheons?
I think Baratheons also have.
Okay. Because I know that the Targaryen deck only had kickers from the horse. I think the neutral deck was strictly letters. They lost the money bag kicker. And the free folk is strictly horse.
Yeah, we got letters and crowns kind of peppered throughout Baratheon, so I just looked back up.
That's a little tough to balance now that I think of it. When you have a faction that is, in essence, an aggressive faction who would obviously want swords, that's how they designed this deck. Swords is always going to be a heavily contested NCU action. So I'm starting to think that they got balanced as best they could from what we've seen so far, but still, I think they are going to be contenders for one of the top factions, as you said, with what we've seen, the Targs as well. So now let's talk about Rob. Rossi, did you play a lot of Rob Commander? I'm pretty sure you did, because competitively, every Stark player plays plays Rob.
I was not a fan of Poland, so Rob was the only option. And I played it again and again and again and again. I think I have more than 60 up to 80 games with Rob. I really love the mechanics, and I also love the new cards which the new version brings.
Let's go ahead and talk about those. We have Sudden Retreat. After an enemy completes a melee attack, target the defender. They perform 1 retreat action. If this targets Rob Stark's unit, it may reroll any retreat distance dice. So, straightforward. We're going to see with the other 2 cards, they're definitely just toned down, reskin versions of his 1.6 cards.
I think this is one of the best cards Rob bring with, because he wants to retreat, and at each point of the game there is a good possibility. Before it was, I think, Tactical Regroup, who brings the free retreat in combination with the
That's right.
with the
Yeah,
D3
Tactical
wounds,
Regroup.
something like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Yeah, and it also created a vulnerable token. I think only the retreat is good enough. For example, if you take the Flayed Man and use this, or if you have the Crown of Man Survivalist and retreat in such situations, or if you can combine it with the attachment of the Commander Rob, it's a great opportunity for retreating and going in again. And as you will see on the Sworn Swords, the reroll is very, very important for you.
I don't know how other people feel about this, but when I would play against Rob, you think you're safe because you got the Alpha Strike on, let's say, Tully Cav, and you brought them down to 1 rank, and you thought you were safe. And then boom, tactical regroup, they heal up to 2nd rank, and then they get a charge on you. It was never fun to see that play happen. Charles, what are your thoughts on this card here?
I think it's good. I mean, it's a free action. Again, it's a retreat action, which, as we're going to see when we look at Rob Commander, things matter when you retreat. Like, there's triggers on retreat throughout the game. We also keep talking about things like Zorsh Riders and a lot of lists, right? As far as a utility unit, that's going to be good for specific matchups. Might not be in both of your lists, but it's a good chance they're in one of them. They trigger weaken tokens whenever they retreat, right? So the whole, Zorses have poor defense. When you catch them and they get stuck in, they get blown up. Well, this prevents them from getting stuck in. They can get away. They get a free retreat, and they'll weaken their opponent. And then they can go around and do other stuff. So there's a ton of utility in this card. Again, it's another good toolbox card. Definitely a toned down version of one of Rob's more powerful and frustrating cards, though. So it does kind of slowly bring him down to earth a little bit as one of the top 3 commanders in the game. So that's really relevant. But also, it's a different trigger, so it's very friendly to sliding into the overall tactics deck. So I do like this card a lot.
All right, next card we have Superior Positioning. When an enemy performs a charge action before resolving that action, if that enemy charges a unit in the front, they suffer disorderly charge on charge distance rolls of a 3 or less. If they suffer disorderly charge, they become vulnerable. So the 1.6 version of Superior Positioning was very frustrating. And it's going to be a testament to how strong the Stark deck is, because when I would play as Rob and I would see this card, usually it's a card that I would play if I could, or I would pitch it in the early game. It really didn't matter to me. But I've seen times when a player would play Superior Positioning and it would literally win them the game. It's such a powerful effect when it was able to work. Now we see something that is, I think, very different. Well, let's just talk about the old version of the card. So the original version was when an enemy unit charges, that enemy must roll an additional charge dice and select the lowest result. If it was charging Rob's unit may make a free 3-inch maneuver before that enemy moves. Comparing the 2 cards, I think it's the same flavor, but different in its own regard. What do you think, Charles?
I like this one better because it doesn't create that really awkward interaction of what happens when Rob's unit backs up randomly out of range. You declared your charge.
Right, I hated it.
Created some arguing on the table that, and if we can eliminate that part, like that's why I don't play true line of sight games, right? With like some of the 40k type stuff or like other games where I'm looking through miniature head height through a window. Oh, you've got a big base; it's bigger than normal. Do I see your hand? I hate things like that. So getting rid of as many things to argue over like that, despite the fact that I clearly like to debate, is the better. This card's still pretty strong, though. It's another defensive play where all the rest of the deck is pretty much anytime or offensive, so it's friendly to your triggers. You also no longer roll multiple dice on the charges. It's just 1 die. I actually think this is going to trigger more disorderlies than the old 2 dice drop the lowest. Take the lowest because you still only disorderly on a 1 or a 2 in most cases. Usually a 1. And most other factions, because they don't have the movement tricks like Starks do, they don't charge until they have a 1-up charge, right? Or maybe a 2-up charge. But making it a 3, a 3 or less is actually very likely to fail, or to get the disorderly portion. So I think it's pretty big. They automatically get a disorderly charge, so they can't play cards, which is on the 3 or less. So and also remember now affects tactics cards until the end of the turn, not until just the end of the action. This is a pretty potent card, honestly, as far as how the game is played and when things matter.
Personally thinking the old card, I love this card. It was so huge all the time. I don't know why I hit this card all the time in round 1, and I know exactly I will throw it away immediately. But I have Sansa, and I save Sansa every time Rob is charged, and so I can position myself that they cannot fit a charge anymore. And yeah, I think 3 or 4 times it saved me the game or won me the game because of this card.
Yeah, it's a wasted activation. If you can get him out of charge, a legal charge range, that's huge.
It was fantastic. It was very fantastic, and it supported the guys who know their deck and know the opportunities. And saving Sansa for this action was every time useful because the enemy always have to thought when, oh, this is Rob Stock. Oh, do I really want? Oh, what happens if he has the card or use Sansa? With a new superior position, it's like, okay, I will charge you anyway, and nobody will expect this card. When it's happened, okay, it's happened. When it's not happened, nobody will care about this card if it's played or not. Personally, as Charles mentioned, it's to play no card till the end of turn, not till the end of action anymore. It makes the disorder charge much better, but I really, really would love if the disorderly charge was just immediately happened and not just on the 4+. I mean, if you have this card, what are your final thoughts about this? Okay, I getting charged, and then I play this card, and does it work? Does it not work?
It could be completely wasted. Yeah, you're right.
It's a commander card. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's a single die roll, bad feel.
Yeah.
That's a thing.
As a commander card, I personally thinking the order of Rob was before to make you a disorder charge. It should make a disorder charge again and maybe get rid of this vulnerable token nobody needs because it's so situational. It could help you to fight back, of course, but if I have this card and to play this card, I would wish a bit more consistency.
All right, so let's talk about the final Rob card. We have hit and run. So after a friendly unit completes a melee attack, if that unit began the turn engaged with the defender, they perform 1 retreat action. If this targets Rob's unit, each enemy they engage with becomes weakened. The big difference here, very important, is now we have if that unit began the turn engaged with the defender. So we no longer see a charge and retreat, which I think is a pretty big nerf, but I don't mind it. I think this was a necessary change. Same situation as tactical regroup. Let's say I'm playing I'm playing as Baratheons. Oh, great! The Stark player wants to charge in. Sure, you can do that. Nope, hit and run. All of my cards are just wasted, or I can't even play them. So personally, I like the change. Charles, what do you think?
I actually don't love it. So this confuses me a little bit, right? Where we say they learned a lot from their mistakes as far as what players like and don't like. Because at the end of the day, we're gonna be when all this COVID stuff comes out, we're all gonna be going home in our shops, in gaming clubs, trying to get folks to play and pick up the game and new players. And we have a lot of conflicting triggers in the core tactics deck. And now you've got a card that has the stupid began the turn engaged with the defender situation, right? That is real awkward again. That is it's the Baratheon problem all over again, right? You got 2 main triggers in the deck really you care about. And then you got one other card that requires you to be engaged with 4. When you're a unit, by the way, a faction, with a free charge, with some maneuver tricks, lots of retreats that are meant to be not engaged when you start your turn, so you can then charge. This card doesn't fit anymore. I don't feel like this fits his idea anymore. Do I think it's useful? Probably. Is it an okay enough card? Probably. I don't like it, though, in the grand scheme of how it's supposed to feel. This is not a synergist card. You're supposed to be doing your retreating, your bobbing and weaving, your shifting, your maneuvering, your charging, right? Your long charge distance from North remembers, re-rolling charge dice. So you're making like 3-up, 4-up charges where you wouldn't normally do it. But this card only works if you were engaged when you got started. So, yeah, get stuck in, I guess. The thing you don't want to do, really. It just doesn't fit.
I slightly disagree with Charles in this case. I personally think it fits to the style of Rob perfectly because the mechanic said that you just have to complete a melee attack. It does not say that the unit who is retreating, which retreating must be the unit you're targeting. So you're taking the swords, you're making an attack, and you can retreat your Talikaf, I think.
It doesn't. It says, so the friendly unit completes a melee attack. If that unit began the turn engaged, they perform one retreat action. So it's that unit refers to the triggering unit.
Okay.
So it's your
sorry,
unit.
I read this. Okay.
So you can't use it to bail out another unit. It's like you can't like charge in with Grey Wind, trigger it, and then bail out your more valuable unit. You can't do that.
Ah, damn it. That. Okay, I agree with you, Charles. I said nothing.
I agree with you. That would have been really tech, though, right? Like if it was open and like that. That's kind of an old Stark trick, right? Like that's old Stark deck mechanics for sure, where there was those loopholes, right? But like, oh no, you think it has to be that guy, but it really doesn't, right? They got rid of that this time around. That unit, specifically the triggering unit.
Yeah. Now I was going to say, Charles, it's a fair point that you made. But remember, we're talking about Starks here, and Rob in particular. Not every one of his cards has to be a home run. I think 99% of people out there are going to be fine with this card.
Yeah, and that's why I said it's probably pretty good, and it's going to be useful because you're going to get stuck in. Let's be honest, especially when we get in with more of the other units, and we talk about some neutral units later, the stacking of -1 to hit and stuff. You're going to have units that are kind of stuck in because they're on objectives. You're going to be on objectives in this game, and this card is good for that. It is actually very good for that because it's going to happen. Playing the game mode's how you win this game more often than not. So it's going to see play. I'm giving it negative points on theme, really. This whole deck, especially with Rob's cards, are about getting out of combat after you've punched somebody in the face, right? You get in, you punch, you back up. You bob and weave. That's the mechanic of Rob and Starks. Core identity hasn't really changed, right? We see that with all these retreats. So the card that requires you to already be stuck in is a little awkward, but I understand. It's also meant to be a way to keep that theme going. And that if you couldn't, like if you didn't draw any of your retreat cards and other cool stuff early because you had a bad hand or something, which is kind of hard with this deck. Deck looks pretty strong. And you did get stuck in, it's meant to give you a way to get your like retreat and probing attack started, your guerrilla tactics started. Like get that initial out with a low value and then keep going with it. Keep it going with the rest of the cards. So like it is pretty good. It just feels a little off tempo for what the deck wants to do. That's it. Like I had to knock something, right? Like they couldn't just be like the best still, right? That'd been bad. Like it said it's the second best deck out there. You know what I'm saying?
All right. So now let's shift gears and let's talk about the units. So first we have the House Umber Great Axes, still at 7 points. 3+ to hit at a 7/6/4 attack profile. They're staying at a 4 defense, but I believe they got a buff in the morale, so they're saving on 5s for morale now. And Executioner's Fury is Sundering, and enemies suffer +1 wound from failing panic tests caused by this attack for each of this unit's destroyed ranks. And then it also has Unyielding. This unit suffers -1 wound from failing panic tests for each of its destroyed ranks. So if we're looking at this unit in a vacuum, totally disregarding neutral units, I personally like this. And I'm a little bit biased because I think they're one of the coolest looking models that the Starks have. And I have a few, and I have not even put them on the table yet, just because at 7 points, Berserkers were just far more efficient. What do you guys think? Rossi, are you going to be testing this unit out?
You asked me what I thought when I saw this. What is that? What is that? This is personally, I would not place it for 6 points.
Really?
Yeah.
Even with +1 movement?
No, it's just if you combined it with something like sudden retreat or hit and run or such like this, Stark Fury is just better. The Thorn Swords are just better than the. I think the total damage output is nearly the same.
Yeah.
If you just ignore the plus wound for the panic test, you really have to make your setup that the great axes work. You need at least an attachment which gives them wishes or such like that, and you're on a 4+ with your armor save, and no defense card in the whole deck, no opportunity to heal yourself up. It's just a bad unit. Sorry for that.
But they look so cool.
Yeah,
Oh,
they
all
are, but I really doubt that they would work.
All right, yeah. At a first glance, from a competitive standpoint, from a tournament player standpoint, not an amazing unit. Native Sundering is fine, considering Umbra Berserkers lost Native Sundering. But when you math things out, and when we get to the Sworn Swords later also, it doesn't actually mean a ton. They're arguably more consistent at what they want to do than the old version, which is a plus. They get there and things like that. They could have a place if the panic skew meta for some factions becomes a real thing. At the moment, people are playing a lot of Followers of Bone as one of the more viable options in testing for free folk because Horrific Visage, and then you have neutrals with Flayed Men being a real problem with their stacking panic triggers. This unit could be kind of a tight fit for kind of a tank mid-range unit in scenario play themed lists into panic skew. If that does become a thing, so depending on what the meta does, these guys could have a place, but they're still not great. I mean, at a 5-up save with a reduced damage from panic tests, that kind of thing, it could be okay considering you no longer have Direwolf's Fervor. And there could easily be a commander that comes along. We got Umber commanders. Literally, we got Grey John. Do have some interesting stuff.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot about this.
Right. So we may have some because they've you might have some other morale based mechanics, some sort of strike fear type stuff or fearless Umber, I don't know, Juggernaut themes here that could make them a little better. But I think they're going to remain a niche list option if the meta skews a specific way. I do think they're a decent unit to drop into panic bomb lists, as to play against panic bomb lists, right? Because Lannisters at the moment, people are like, "Oh, Lannister guard spam." Okay, this unit is actually not the worst until Lannister guard spam, honestly. And Lannister guard may have a hard time getting through even a 4-up armor save offensively. They're really betting on panic, right? And if you get hit with that first panic bomb and you do take some wounds maybe from Lannister Supremacy, then you start triggering some of these other cards and abilities. They can crack back reliably hard against the Lannister Guardsman's 3-up armor save and low morale, right? And then kind of do something. So they may end up being an answer if the meta skews a certain way. So keep them painted, keep them ready. I'm not auto sold on them, but your local meta may have a problem with panic bombs, and I think these guys will see some viable utility play into that kind of meta if you have one.
That's definitely fair enough. And again, in my defense, I said I like them in a vacuum.
Real cool, yeah.
But we're looking at 7 points, and that is treading into elite territory. We already have seen 7-point units like Bastards Girls. We see for a point more, you can get Flayed Men. And I'm sure that there are going to be other cavalry units for 7 points. And just the free maneuver innate within them is worth taking over what I see with the great axes. So we'll see what the meta dictates. Whether or not people will be fielding them, only time will tell.
I wanted to talk in combination with the cards, if it's okay for.
Of course.
I'm not sure if Winter's Might, both giving Sundering, don't know if this fits perfectly for them, but Northern Ferocity fits perfectly. What are you thinking about this?
Oh, for sure. Vicious on these guys is just that's peanut butter and jelly, I think. Winter's Might, I feel like would be wasted unless you really, really need the reroll. The Great Axes are going to be best friends with Northern Ferocity, I think.
How many wounds can you create with the moral tests?
So somebody actually mathed out the ridiculousness. If you put like Ramsey and Great Axes and charge someone in the front, and you're on your last rank, and you charge them in the rear, and you're on your last rank, and you play the cards above, you can get to like Panic +8 or something ridiculous. Like a T3 +8 on a unit. If it's like Free Folk Raiders or something, and then like +6 against everyone else. Like it gets pretty ridiculous if you live the dream. That should never happen. But yeah.
So true.
But like there's ways to do it for sure. Yeah, and then your opponent just passes the test. Like just like, all right, you need an 11. All right, boxcars, go.
All right, are you guys ready to move on to the next unit?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Sworn Swords here. So the Stark Bread and Butter unit. We have new Stark Fury. Well, actually, let's talk about the attack profile. So they're now hitting on they're hitting on a 4+ still, but they lose a die at full rank and second rank. The Stark Fury we see is an order now. So when this unit performs a melee attack, before rolling attack dice, this attack gains critical blow and sundering. After completing this attack, this unit suffers 2 wounds, -1 wound for each of its destroyed ranks. Instead of a +1 to hit, we see sundering now. And then no longer the D3 wounds after performing Stark Fury. Again, now that it's an order, I feel like that's reasonable. Are you still going to be trying to spam Sworn Swords, Rossi? Are you going to rely on this unit to be your workhorse?
At 1.6, Sword Swords were 5.5 points in my personal point of view because the Stark Fury was not an order. The value was decent. The Amos value was decent. It had 1 attack more, and on a 3 with Stark Fury in combination, they were just good. I think personally one of the best 5 points units in the whole game. What we see right now is a unit who really, really wants to charge because they can get out the maximum value out of critical blow and thundering. You can expect that you're hitting nearly all the dice, maybe 1 or 2, and not 1 or 2 if you're charging. I would not call Stark Fury when I'm inside, when I'm engaged inside a combat battle. I would not do it. But maybe the cards of Rob would help them. And also one problem is the tactics card are not fit really into their favor anymore because, as you see again, Sundering is also on Stark Fury. You can get it both times.
Also, we're seeing conflicting triggers, right? We're seeing conflicting triggers. You can't see,
Yeah, true. Conflicting triggers as well. Yeah. I think they will find the place in my army. Definitely. I will place 1 or 2 because it's 5 points and you really need the activations. They're not bad, but they are not that good anymore.
I don't know, Rossi. I feel
Yeah.
like them gaining sundering is huge.
Yeah.
A 5-point unit with crit blow and sundering, even though it's an order, that seems like elite type abilities to me at 5 points. What do you think, Charles?
They're still really good. So you saw some people recently try to popularize a couple of lists that ran like 4 units of Stark Sworn Swords, and actually played well with them. And here's the reason why. Current 1.6 Stark Sworn Swords at 5 points with the current Stark deck and commanders. It's also important to take those into account. Would frequently kill 7 and 8 point units. Straight up, come in, rando 12, 13 hits. Let's go. Get bodied, right? But these are toned down, clearly toned down. It's an order now, things like that. I do like, I guess, the conflicting trigger because there's a lot of reroll attacks up top in the main tactics deck. I have played Victarion and Greyjoys, and Greyjoys also have a couple of like if this is Victarion's unit, reroll, reroll any attack dice, things like that, plus the free attacks. So I was crit fishing in Iron Makers before, right? And that's very powerful. It's basically a charge every time. It can be a lot. At least in his case, it's all commander cards. These would all be core deck. So I understand the balance window here. Getting Sundering is really important though. So if you math it out, you drop a die if they kept their same number of dice on their previous attack profile and used Stark Fury, they actually would have the new Stark Fury against an armor 4 unit would actually net 1 wound. So this version would do more damage. So they removed the dice, which means it goes pretty much to exactly the same damage output they had before. So they're just as threatening, except for the fact that Sundering now means when they're stuck in and not charging, this order has a little more utility in that regard. But I agree because the conflicting triggers up top, it's not the best. Like you would just be better off playing Winter's Might, right? You just would. You wouldn't worry about the order because it's the same, right? It's the same number of wounds, same reduction on ranks. You lose crit blow, but you get the Sundering, and that's what you needed. And then you can get the rerolls because you just need to get the hits at 4 up to hit. So they are definitely downgraded to some extent, but they are still probably one of the best. They don't outpace Lannister Guardsmen for me personally, but they're probably one of the best 5-point units in the game currently, still at this version. But that's okay because 5-point is rank and file. It shouldn't be a game changer. They were literally a game changer in some lists in 1.6. So it was a warranted rebalance, but I don't think it was overtuned. Most Stark players I know are okay with the downgrade, right? Like they understand and they're like, most of the plays I want to make with the Stark Thorn Swords, I still can. And honestly, as we've mentioned about Great Axes, people have masked it out. They do about as much as the Great Axes do. So they're still a 5-point unit that's outshining 7-point units, 6-point units, and their own faction, much less other factions. So they're still quite good if that's the conversation we're having.
It's going to be unavoidable that the Sworn Swords, even in 1.7, are going to be the baseline for the bread and butter 5-point units in every faction. Charles, did you say that you value the Guardsmen, Lannister Guardsmen, higher than the Sworn Swords?
Slightly, because of the scaling that Panic Damage does with their unit versus into what it does. So like their unit gets around the only thing. So Lannister Supremacy gets around the thing that would normally make Lannister Supremacy bad, which is a good morale score, so low morale points, right? However, because the way it scales, it actually corrects itself. So a 5-up morale army still takes checks on 8s if they have a full rank, right? And a 3-up armor save, it's pretty hard to get a whole rank down. And then it does extra damage on top in a way that there's not a lot. There's like a max. I think people have already seen it. Spoils that like there's a reduction of by 2, right? So you could take 6 damage or 4 damage, but that's a lot of damage still. The opponent doesn't get to actually interact with a ton. This unit is still luck based. Your opponent still gets to make their separate saves for Sundering. There's a lot more chances to prevent the damage you do. Crit blow still has to happen, and this hurts your unit a little bit. Technically, with Lannister Guardsmen, though, that's kind of a push because they got hit first. So the wounds exchange is probably close to the same, honestly. But I do think the 2-player starter box is going to show Lannister Guardsmen, probably the good baseline for like defensive passive damage infantry. Has a really good 5-point baseline of like what a really good one looks like. And then Stark Sworn Swords are going to show the 5-point baseline for a, screw it, charge it mechanic 5-point unit. So it's going to be pretty cool to see them in the starter boxes, the 2-player boxes face to face, because it is kind of a line in the sand of design theory, right? Of unit theory. So, but yeah, I do put Lannister Guardsmen slightly ahead of the Sworn Swords.
Do you have any other thoughts on Sworn Swords before we move on, Rossi?
No, I think we can move on. Charles mentioned everything. I just would agree 100%.
Let's move on to Grey Wind here. And I think a lot of the people who were waiting on the visions for Starks were holding their breath to see what wolves look like in 1.7, and now we see it. So this is a big change here. So we see Greywind. He has an attack profile of 3+ to hit, but he's rolling 4 dice. He has a 4 defense, and this model now has 4 wounds, Sundering, and Disrupt, which is enemies engaged with this unit suffers -1 to hit. And we can't forget about the fact that it is now 3 points. Still needs to be fielded with Rob Stark, but it's not a free activation anymore, essentially. I think a lot of people should be happy about seeing what wolves look like. Now, the Disrupt is a different story in itself, but Charles, what do you think?
Greywind's really good. 3 points for an activation is a good baseline. It's a little deceptive, though, because you have to have the attachment. When you look at attachment Rob, he's not amazing. So it's a 5-point unit, and it's still a solid 5-point unit just because Greywind's very good. It raises a lot of interesting questions, though. I think if all the wolves plus attachments equal 5 points, those attachments better be really good. Because, like, 5 points for Commander Rob and Greywind can be overtaxed. That's okay because Commander Rob exists. So it is just 3 points sometimes. I hope to see either A, really good balance in the 5-point combo range for the other wolves, or it's 4 points. I would be cool with seeing 3-point wolves and 1-point character attachments. Like, Rickon didn't do much before, so, like, that's okay. If the Shaggy Dog, I think his is his, also will have 3 points, right? Brandon Holor was really good before, so if they're still really good, I can see it being 5. So I would like to see the 4 to 5 window balanced accurately. Disrupt is dumb because it stacks with Agile.
I was waiting for it.
And also Howl and NCU is also separate. A separate keyword. So you have different, and then you could run Jack and Hagar to copy it, right? So you can have several, and if they do get their own, if you take mummers and things like that, like you end up with like just -4 to hit, -3 to hit, and looking at Free Folk right now with an all 4-up army, needing 6s to hit on everything is going to be problematic. But Sundering 4 attacks on 3 pluses. This wolf alone can take out and finish off a unit pretty reliably. So that's his cav move. Still very, very good attachment activation, honestly. Concerns with Disrupt. Curious to see what the other wolves do because so Greywind had 1 ability before that gave out tokens, but no Sundering. Now it has Sundering instead of the tokens, which is a different averages to wound ratio. So I'm sure they did that for math. Disrupt is really interesting, though. I don't think all wolves are going to have Disrupt. But you might see like Shaggy Dog had Vicious before, may have Vicious and a keyword similar to maybe the Crazy Presence, basically +1 -1. That's on Blademan.
Intimidating Presence, I think.
Yeah. Shaggy Dog might get Intimidating Presence or something like that, which could be interesting. If to make them more 3 points, those could be cool. So it raises a lot of questions for the design space, probably as many as it answers. But Greywind is still very good, and I think it's a fair balance, specifically with Commander Rob.
I'm very glad that Charles said everything which is needed, so I don't have to say anything about Disrupt anymore. But I cannot avoid to say 1 or 2 sentences more to this bullshit. Sorry for that. If you're calling everything agile, everything is fine. Nobody will tell anything about the -1 to hit. If you're putting agile on Holland, agile on the horse, on the Greywind, and agile on the mummy skirmisher, everything is all right. Nobody would complain. But could you imagine you playing a 5-point unit? Maybe you are on a 4+, and okay, my first turn is I'm putting Holland on, and Greywind is connected. So I have maybe 10 dice, just for example, 10 dice, and then I think, oh, I'm hitting, I'm rolling, and then, 0-6. Okay, I don't hit. Yeah, this is fun. This is very fun to play.
No, you're forgetting, Rossi, that you'll probably have a weaken token on you as well. So
Yeah.
even if you
Yeah.
But that is a very good point, because let's just think of things outside of the design space and how sort of poor that is. As gamers, a lot of people are attracted to games like this because they want to fight things. It's the whole point of tactical wargaming. You want to hit things. So when you have something this prevalent that can stack, I feel like that is the epitome of a negative play experience because you're playing a game and you don't get to do anything.
Hear me out. Hear me out here. Lannisters with guardsman spam, right? So Lannister supremacy all over the board. Into Howlin, Jaqen, Grey Wolf, let's say Robin Mummers, right? So all of your guardsmen hit on 6-ups, and they're going to get hit with things like Counter-Strike and not do anything. And then none of the Stark players want to swing into you because you have Lannister Supremacy, which gets around their minus the hit spam because you just blow them up with Lannister Supremacy. So you just look at each other. How does that game end? Like, who's got the most field points? No one's going to want to swing. Right? Like, you'd be like, well, we should have played our other lists. What are they? It was more of the same. Well, crap. All right. And, like, not to be on the free folk train, but, like, people are like, oh, wait till you see Giants. Maybe they give you a great option. Giants roll 1 dice at a 2+. You can give me -3 to hit. My Giant swing on a 5+ is not making me feel better right now. Like, it's a weekend. All right. Why did I bring the 7-point behemoth?
From the competitive point of view, I would think I would place him 100% just for the disrupt.
Yeah, it's super playable.
It's if you combine this with Howland and Jaqen Hagar, I think you're safe. I mean, what could happen to you if you can maybe place a weekend or such like that, and they come in on a 5+, then maybe they can reroll, then you weakened, they hit nothing. You don't have to carry your armor save or anything anymore because they hitting nothing anymore.
Yeah, and let's not forget that Howland and Jaqen.
This is what I personally want to mention again and again and again. I would not love to play against this. It's just a very bad, very, very bad play experience.
Yeah. And let's also not forget to mention that Howland's NCU also gives the fact that all terrain is treated as hindering and rough terrain, I think. So you're gonna be 1 inch shorter, so it's harder to charge. And well, not disordered, but yeah, no charge bonus. So no charge rerolls, right? So it's like you're coming in raw, no charge rerolls. Weakened or not, you're not hitting very much, if at all, right? Which is why I said you might actually see some decent morale skew lists in like with the Umbers, right? That 5 morale with the minus damage, because it could easily be that it's super hard to hit them, right? So having a solid morale to where you don't get chipped out with morale damage instead could be valuable, right? Like that could create a home for units like Great Axes because, well, if you can't hit them, they got all day to chew on you, right? And then the few times you trigger panic, they take 1 less wound, so they're in there longer, right? That could matter. It could be a super slog.
Davos in chat just mentioned it's time to scrounge up all the auto wounds you can find. I can't really think of off the top of my head what we've seen so far as auto wounds. They have said that they are going to be toning it down in 1.7. But one point I'd like to make is if Charles is foretelling the future where we're going to see a disrupt meta versus a Lannister supremacy meta, I think everyone's going to be in for a bad time.
Yeah, and I don't think that's 100% what it's going to be, but what you're going to have to deal with is that one of the 2 lists, right, in the 2 list format is going to have that. So it's going to make your dojoing and like your 2 list tech really awkward. And it's going to make sure you're going to have to understand what I call list chicken, right? If I drop this, he has to drop this. And do I have something that's strong enough to force him to drop the other thing, right? So like for it happened in 1.6 with Free Folk, right? You looked at Free Folk and you go, okay, I literally can't drop certain things because they have Jarl and Trappers, right? I can't risk the solos. So I can't run that. So I have to drop this other thing. And it just so happened Mammoths were really good at beating the other thing, right? So Free Folk inherently were better at list chicken than a lot of other matchups, right? Because I could say, I not only do I activate you, you have to drop something else. Because if I drop this, it's super in my favor. But I know for a fact I have a fairly strong matchup still into your other list with my second list, right? So I can bully you into a pick that is not your best list, or into a list that I can predict, and then my other list is tuned to play into that type of list, right? So I never want to have to. I don't even care if I have to never get to play my threatening list. It forces you into a predictable drop, which means I can really gear and tune my second list to those predictable drops. It's very likely at this point in time with what we've seen, which for all you people, oh, nothing's official. Okay, nothing's official. But if I'm going to treat everything like it's not official and not dojo and think about what could be, then why do I care about spoilers? So I'm going to dojo and I'm going to talk about things and I'm going to be very wrong about a lot of it and I'm not going to care and I'm going to have a good time about it anyway. And my point is, it's possible and it's fun to talk about what could be. And I do think at the moment, those two options are probably some of the strongest we've seen. Um, and people should be talking about how to answer them because that's the whole point of spoiler season.
All right, Rossi, do you have anything else to say about Greywin before we wrap it up by talking about Rob's commander and attachment?
We can go to Rob Commander. I think for every one of us is crystal clear that Greywind will be played, and Disrupt will force the guys to play more bows or range attacks or such like this.
We'll further reiterate that fact because, we've not only seen the strength of Rob's cards here, but we'll go into his commander first. So we have Rob Stark, the Wolf Lord. He has the order Tactical Reposition. Start of an enemy turn, target one friendly unit in short range. They perform a 3-inch shift. He also has Regroup. So after completing a retreat action, this unit restores 2 wounds, plus 1 wound for each of its destroyed ranks. So the designers are trying to pull a fast one on us. They've essentially just given Rob Tactical Regroup. But one thing to note is, I believe you're always within short range of yourself. So, Rob can target his own unit to perform the 3-inch shift. And this shows with Regroup that it's very synergistic with the cards that he has.
What you got, Rossi?
It's too expensive. I will not play it. Charles?
This is his commander.
Come on, his commander. It's free.
Oh, no. Sorry. I was with the attachment. Sorry for that.
Well, now I know how you really feel.
It's powerful. I will play it. I really love
All
the
right.
mechanic.
Other side of the coin. Checks out.
Critical repositioning. It's very, very cool. I had a test game with a friend, and we've played this, and he said, "Oh, this unit moves 3-inch shift," and the whole positioning of the whole game was totally different after this move.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we're seeing his old version of the card, Superior Positioning, a little bit different, but it's an order now that he gets, and then Tactical Regroups, essentially the 1.6 version, sort of tacked onto his commander as well. One thing that Starks really lacked in 1.6 was healing, other than Edard Commander and Tactical Regroup. But this is a reliable way to get your ranks back up every round. And again, you get Greywin with this. So I don't think people are going to complain. In fact, I think we're going to see a lot of Rob Stark again in 1.7.
I think so as well. The main question is in which unit you're putting Rob Stark in. Maybe dervishes, maybe don't know.
I mean, I think one of the strengths that Starks had before is you had a 5-point unit that had decent stats already. So Sworn Swords were always an option, I think. And I don't think that's any different now.
Yeah, I think he's going to go in an infantry flavor to choice, right? We mentioned Mummers. Even go on Blackguard if you want to, right? Like some passive damage, keep him alive, get in and out, do stuff. Somebody's kind of in the middle, so you can constantly use tactical reposition to do something meaningful. Tell you Sworn Shields. They're probably going to still be defensive and just not die. But when they finally do, you bring him back up, so he'll be able to just get his commander VPs on a unit all day, just doing stuff sometimes. Like, it's going to really depend on the goal of the list, I think, as far as what unit he's going to go in. I think he's very good, though. I think Regroup is a super strong ability because, as we've seen, plenty of retreat options, right, as well as the tactics board. And they already want horses, so that's a thing. This shift is huge because it's better than relying on your cards for the shifts. and then you partner that up. Let's say we already mentioned Jockin and Howland, right? Let's say those are your two NCUs you pick. That's cool. But maybe you don't want to do that because this is not an anti-hit list, whatever. Pair him with like a Varus, new Varus, which has a shift, has some heals, has some extra hits, has letters, right? Like, then it's really hard to deny Stark's tempo with somebody like a Varus who gives you so many options. So now you've got like on start of your enemy's turn, I'm gonna shift 3. They're gonna take horses. I'm gonna shift again. On my turn, I'm gonna shift again with my own card because I play swift reposition, or maybe I just shift again, and now I'm completely out of line of sight or completely in your flank, and I'm just gonna charge. You know what I'm saying? With assault orders or on my own charge, right? Or now Cav not only can get in your flank, but my Cav can actually get in your rear arc potentially, right? Because I've just danced. We got 3 inches here. You got 2 inches on the card, 5 inches. Let me look at Varus real quick. I pulled it up for this reference. I just gotta find it. Another 3 inches. So you just danced 8 inches somewhere on shifts, orthogonally. You know what I'm saying? All before you activated with the Cav maneuver. Heck, Grey went in the back arc, 4 dice on 3s with Sundering. So she's safe and out of another enemy charge range and just go, right? Like, you have a lot of utility there, especially if you start doing silly stuff with like Nuvaris. You could see a really weird board state with Starks still, despite not having Swift Advance. I think Rob Commander's really good.
With the change, no longer seeing Swift Advance, and a lot of the free movements replacing themselves with shifts, I think we're definitely going to see a more strategic positioning game, more so than it was in 1.6. Very chess-like movements.
Don't tell Larks.
From the gameplay, it's very usual that you're playing your unit like that the sign of arc is just hitting the tray of the other. You know what I mean? And if you can do instantly shift at some point, you can just move out of the position. It's very cool for this.
Oh, right. Yep. I mean, it's like I said, it's going to be a new style of strategic positioning. And I think people are really going to have to adjust their play style and think in different ways, which I think is very healthy for the game.
Yep.
True.
All right, so let's talk about his attachment version. We already know what Rossi thinks. He says it's too expensive. But, all right, so he gets Swift Retreat as an order. So after an enemy completes a melee attack on this unit performs 1 retreat action. And then he has Enhanced Mobility. This unit gains +1 movement and may pivot before marching. So what we saw in his attachment version, the Enhanced Mobility, his point cost goes down. But I think that really is not relevant because Grey Wind is no longer free. So if we could switch the orders from his commander and his attachment, I think it would be a little too powerful. But I think I agree with Rossi here. I don't know if there's any reason why you would want this attachment.
So people already put him with basically the same order, right? In archers to get access to Grey Wind, which was cheaper. Which is a thing. He costs 1 point then. If Stormcrow archers keep adaptive, you get Stormcrow archers. At which point it's easier to get them in position on in between turns when you use a march. You get retreated if somehow somebody uses outflank with the increase of outflank we see, or like Dothraki Cav. So it could be useful depending on how much you want disrupt, because the question then becomes: is Grey Wind worth 4 points to you? I think in some lists it's possible. Because it's the activation at 4 points is still cheaper than a 5-point unit. And you get disrupt and a decent body. 4 wounds, 4 dice, 3+ sundering for a closer at the end of the game, last ditch charge. So I'm not gonna say it's not gonna see play. I do think certain players who are really good at leveraging activation advantage and stuff are still gonna do it. You saw a lot of European players already played Stormcrow archers and Stormcrow units, mercs and stuff for the discount on attachments to get all their family in anyway to get wolves. I don't know if that's going to change because of how good Grey Wind is already.
All right, so there we have it. We see the Stark spoilers, and as Charles mentioned before, the general consensus is people are pretty happy with what we see. I am really curious to know what Cav looks like. I'm really excited to see what they're going to do to Outriders and Tully Cav. One thing that can be said is we have a distinct identity, and it's different, it's fresh, and it's healthy. So, any closing thoughts, Charles?
No, I think not to poke at anybody, but I feel there was a greater understanding of Starks and what Starks needed or could or should be than some of the other rebalances. I am actually pretty excited to see the other Stark units because I think outside of Great Axes being probably a corner case, looking at the rest of the design changes, I feel like the kind of pseudo unsatisfactory feelings people get without Great Axes is probably an outlier. I mean, we got a decent tactics deck. We got decent commander cards. We got some solid unit tweaks and a solid commander attachment. I really think you got a lot to hope for in a pattern, established pattern for Starks. Umbers were still really. We didn't even talk about Umber Berserkers, but like Umber Berserkers are still great at 6 points. They're a great 6 point unit. That's actually one of the things that makes Great Axes look probably bad, is that you can just take Berserkers. Berserkers are real good. And the new Berserker champion with Insight is real good. So like, Stark's got a lot to be happy about, man. Starks are gonna be really good. I think Lannisters are so far looking pretty good too. Which I like to talk about game store owners and community builders. Your 2-player box is starting to look like a solid box, guys. It really is. Sworn Swords, Grey Wind, Rob, Tactics deck, Guardsmen. You know, Halberdiers I think are in the core box. They look pretty good. And Lannisters too. So like, 2-player box is looking pretty solid going into 2021, which is always a gamble whenever you do a rebalance like this, that the starter boxes blow. I mean, y'all heard my opinions on the free folk box. The 2-player box, though, the biggest single buying commitment in the game, looks real legit though. So it's I think this looks good.
My first reaction when I was looking at the army was I really want to put this army on the table, and I'm very, very excited how the meta will go. I'm sure that, yeah, 1 or 2 competitive army lists will be played from Starks, but the power level of the deck decreases dramatically. But I think they are playable. They are competitive. I think it will be very, very fun to play. I personally think that maybe I will start Starks again. I was so yeah. I was not happy about Starks anymore, about the game plan. But when I see this, I think it's very, very fun to play.
And I think that's awesome. Like a guy who's played as many games as you, because you play a lot of games online. We talked about this last time you were on the show, right? Like 100+ games pretty quickly whenever you got into the game. You play on the competitive scene. You're really good about testing things with people, helping people theory craft lists. So for an old hat like you who was really burnt out on the faction identity, to say that it excites you again to play it is probably the best thing I've heard about 2021, other than Targaryen celebrations in the street, right? Like those are the two biggest takeaways. Like Baratheons let out a sigh of relief. They didn't dance in the street. There was literally a Targaryen like horse parade, and then this from you. So like those two things are clearly the winning of 2021 so far. And I think it's cool that a player who is influential like you, as far as just being friends with everybody in the discords and being on different channels and playing in games, is excited to play. It's a super healthy thing for us. And I think that's dope.
I really respect that you are able to feel happiness for other people, Charles, after we saw what happened to the free folk. So, major props to you.
It's so fun.
Hey, I have a Hand of the King pledge, right? So I have outs.
Let's go ahead and give any shout outs we may have. Charles, you want to go first?
Yeah. Shout out to Rossi for losing some sleep and coming hang out with us. Tough game in the World Cup. It was fun to watch you play. It's always a pleasure to watch you play. And I'm still hashtag Team Rossi. It was real dope to see you put Night's Watch on the table too. Man of principles. I appreciate that. And yeah, just in general, we always get good feedback from the podcast. Community's been great. I've been playing a lot of Blood Bowl, a little bit of Blood Bowl with George and the 3 Sales team. So, as always, much love to all the content creators. Keep it up, guys. We're almost made it through all these visions, and pretty soon we'll be able to play some games.
Rossi, do you have any shout outs?
It was a pleasure again for being here. Thank you very much for inviting me. I will get up again if you invite me again. No problem. My baby's crying all the time, so my wife is awake and she's looking at my shoulder. So
good morning, Mrs. Rossi.
No problem for me to wake up. Yeah, it's always a fun to talk to you, to be part of the competitive community, and to put my share.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll second Charles's sentiments that we really appreciate you waking up to do this podcast with us. It's always a pleasure. And I can't forget to shout out the rest of the players that are left in the World Cup. We do see that we've already exceeded the expectations from some people in the community. They thought that NA wouldn't really show up for the finals, but we're doing all right. North America is doing fine. And a special shout out to Zero Torque, who is a patron, and he was able to make it out of the first round. So good luck to him. Good luck to the rest of the players, not only NA, but anyone who's playing in the World Cup. And then finally, as always, huge thank you to my patrons. Could not do this without you guys. And so just stay tuned for the next visions. I'm sure we're going to see either Night's Watch or Lannisters. So we're wrapping these things up, and I am still excited. So with that, I'll go ahead and close out, and see you guys next time.